Hello everyone! Today we're going back to the most famous Egyptian necropolis,
which is famous for its two great pyramids, Khufu's and Khafre's. But today we'll focus on the third pyramid.
I'm gonna take you to the Pyramid of Menkaure. Each time I visited Egypt, it was closed, but it finally opened to the public. But as you know, filming in Giza isn't easy. But still, I'll take my camera with me and let's see what happens.
Menkaure's so-called third pyramid is in fact only the sixth largest in Egypt. It gave way not only to its neighbors but also to the pyramids in Luxor, including the so-called Black Pyramid of Amenemhat III from the 18th century BC. I'll show you rare footage and present lesser-known facts. Not only will I tell you about the pyramid itself, its complex and discoveries, but we'll also go inside. Let's go! The oldest mention of the pyramid comes from the Greek historian from the 5th century BC, Herodotus, who wrote in his work Histories. And this king also left a pyramid, though considerably smaller than his father's. Each side of it is 20 feet shorter than 3 plethora. It's also quadrangular and half built of Ethiopian stone. Another Greek historian, Diodorus Siculus, wrote in the 1st century BC. Although it was inferior in size to its predecessors, it surpassed them in skill and luxury of stone. The north side of the pyramid was inscribed that it was built by Mykerinos. Unlike the Great Pyramid of Khufu, the Pyramid of Menkaure wasn't accessible to ancient travelers. As in the Pyramid of Khafre, the entrance was much closer to the ground. Stripped of its facing, covered with debris and sand blown by the desert wind, the entrance was rediscovered only in the 19th century. This characteristic hole on the northern wall of the pyramid was made in 1835 by the Italian explorer Giovanni Battista Caviglia, of course by the use of gunpowder. He started looking for the entrance to the pyramid in this place due to a large gap that had previously existed there. The crack was probably a remnant after the famous Belzoni, who had previously been the first to get inside Khafre's pyramid and who abandoned his search while working on the Menkaure's pyramid due to lack of funds. The discovery of the entrance was finally made by the British general and politician Howard Wyse in 1837. Years of destruction of the pyramid were fit for nothing as Wyse discovered the entrance 13 feet below this terrible hole. Interestingly, Wyse had no plans to make any discoveries. He'd come to Egypt as a tourist just 2 years earlier. The discovery of the entrance certainly saved the pyramid, because Wyse, like Belzoni and Caviglia before him, had been using gunpowder to create a long tunnel inside the pyramid to get his way into the burial chamber. The entrance passage leads to the first chamber, carved in the rock. The so-called paneled chamber contains decorative niches on the walls. It measures 3 by 3.5 meters. At its south end, we see a granite-framed doorway leading to a smaller portcullis chamber with huge vertical blocks of granite that once blocked the corridor to subsequent chambers. the robbers simply avoided these obstacles by carving out a corridor surrounding the portcullis chamber. We are now in a high corridor leading to the largest chamber in the pyramid, the upper chamber. It measures approximately 14 by 4 meters. It was here in 1837 that Weiss found a broken wooden anthropomorphic coffin with the name Menkaure. Of course, there were no anthropomorphic coffins in the Old Kingdom. The one found was placed inside the pyramid 2,000 years after Menkaure's death, probably during the 26th Said dynasty. As we know, in the late period, the legendary rulers of the Old Kingdom were particularly revered. Perhaps it was a symbolic reburial of the pharaoh whose remains had previously been destroyed by tomb robbers. Interestingly, human remains initially attributed to Menkaure were found in the upper chamber. The bones were examined using the radiocarbon method. They come from late antiquity and probably belong to a tomb robber who never left the pyramid, so it also became his tomb. We are now 15 meters below the pyramid's ground level and finally reach the lower chamber, built entirely of precisely fitted blocks of granite. The chamber is 6.5 meters long and 2.5 meters wide. It was in this chamber that Weiss found a beautifully decorated granite or basalt sarcophagus without a lid, which for unknown reasons was in the upper chamber. He found no hieroglyphs on the empty sarcophagus, only Arabic graffiti written in chalk. We know what the sarcophagus looked like thanks to detailed drawings by the discoverers, as the sarcophagus was lost on the way to England. It went under with the ship Beatrice, somewhere in the western part of the Mediterranean Sea, where it's still waiting to be discovered. As you can see, the stone slabs were removed from the floor by treasure hunters. Originally, the chamber was like one large casket made of red granite.
The burial chamber is quite small, but the pyramid itself is also small compared to its neighbors. The burial chamber is like a compact granite box protecting a sarcophagus. In times when copper tools were used, these enormous granite blocks were impossible to break through by robbers. Moreover, all the pyramids were guarded constantly.
On our way back to the upper chamber, we come across the entrance to the so-called niche chamber, a mysterious room that may have served as a food storage for the deceased pharaoh. As you can see, the chamber is closed to visitors. Menkaure means eternal as the soul of Ra. This is the name of the 5th or 6th pharaoh of the 4th dynasty. He was probably the son of Khafre and Queen Khamene'tep I. Like his father, Menkaure married his own sister, Khamene'tep II. He reigned from 18 to 22 years. There's no certainty because the famous Turin king list is damaged exactly in the place with this information. In fact, apart from his names, buildings and appearance, he left behind many sculpted images. We know little about Menkaure. Oof, it's high time to get some fresh air. On the western wall, around the entrance to the pyramid, there's a marked contrast between a fragment of the carefully dressed surface of the granite casing and the remaining raw blocks. The entire cover would probably have been smoothed out if Menkaure had lived longer. Also, the unfinished pyramid temple we'll see in a moment indicates that the pharaoh didn't live long enough to complete his burial complex. Today, 5 to 8 lower rows of granite outer blocks remain in place. Originally, there were 16 to 18 rows. Traveler accounts from the early modern period confirm that still in the 16th century, most of the granite facing was on the walls of the pyramid. The greatest merits in destroying the pyramids were made by the 12th century Sultan of Egypt, Al-Aziz Uthman, son of the famous Saladin. In his times, the Red Pyramid, as it was called in the Middle Ages, and other pyramids were considered antediluvian structures, monuments of idolaters, that cast a sinister shadow on the capital of the Ayyubid Sultanate, Cairo. The attempt to dismantle the Great Pyramid ended in failure, so the Sultan took on the smallest of the pyramids and achieved partial success. Within 8 months, he managed to remove some of the blocks on the northern wall of the pyramid. Big changes await the Menkaure pyramid in the near future. Egypt's gift to the world in the 21st century, or Project of the Century. This is what the Secretary General of Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities, Dr. Mustafa Waziri, called the initiative, which starts this year. The project of Egyptian and Japanese archaeologists involves restoring the pyramid to its original state, reinstalling hundreds of granite blocks that once formed its outer casing. The reconstruction involves using only the original blocks currently scattered around the pyramid, as well as those buried around its base. However, this isn't an easy task. Some of the stones originally belonged to the pyramid temple or were part of the ramp used in its construction. The project is to last 3 years, and during the extraction of buried blocks, archaeologists hope to make many new discoveries. So this was perhaps the last chance to freely film the smallest of the 3 pyramids. As you know, in Egypt there's a strict ban on filming sites excavated by archaeologists. Perhaps during my next visit, the pyramid will be unrecognizable. Built of limestone, it originally reached 125 cubits in height, which equals to 65.5 meters. It's currently 61 meters high and its base is 102 by 104 meters. Ancient sources say, although much smaller, the pyramid was the most beautiful. Besides its lower part covered with a precious covering of red Aswan granite, a typical facing made of Tura limestone was placed about 3/4 of the way up the pyramid. The Tura quarry, located approximately 30 kilometers east of Giza, provided the finest and whitest limestone used for facing the walls of the pyramids and the richest mastabas of the Old Kingdom. What distinguishes the Menkaure pyramid is the pyramid temple directly adjacent to its eastern wall. It was designed for the offering service of the king after his death. Menkaure's pyramid temple was discovered by Howard Weiss while he was still searching for the entrance to the pyramid. However, he didn't decide to excavate the site. The temple was substantially buried by sand and debris until 1906, when American archaeologists led by George Reisner began to clean it. Of course, the temple was never completely buried. Today you only need to look at these massive walls to realize which limestone blocks have been exposed to desert winds for thousands of years. The lowest parts are the best preserved, where even today traces of tools used by the ancient Egyptians are visible. Some of the limestone blocks are huge, especially those forming the skeleton of the temple, weighing even over 100 tons. The largest block weighs about 220 tons. The blocks of local limestone, still so impressive to us today, were covered with fine limestone or granite. Menkaure probably managed to complete the limestone walls of the temple and began to cover them with granite. However, the finishing of the temple is attributed to his successor and probably son, Shepseskaf. Shepseskaf, who reigned at the turn of the 26th and 25th centuries BC, used much weaker materials, such as mud brick, to complete the temple. So we have many contrasts here. Gigantic, precisely hewn blocks adjoin a brick wall covered with white plaster. Interestingly, it was Shepseskaf who broke with the family tradition of royal burials in Giza. This, probably the last ruler of the 4th dynasty, built his tomb in southern Saqqara, and it wasn't a pyramid, but a large stone mastaba, today called in Egypt Mastabat el-Firaun, which simply means the pharaoh's mastaba. I tried very hard to show it to you, but access to it is still prohibited. Maybe next time. We don't know what motivated Shepseskaf to move to Saqqara. Was it about the closeness of the pyramids of Snefru in Luxor, the founder of the 4th dynasty who was also the greatest pyramid builder? If so, why did Shepseskaf build a mastaba for himself? What's certain is that Shepseskaf's successors followed in his footsteps by building their pyramids also in Saqqara, which again became the most important necropolis of Memphis in the times of the 5th and 6th dynasties. The western part of the temple, adjacent to the pyramid wall, is the best preserved. You can wander around its chambers. It gives the impression of a small labyrinth. This part of a temple was covered by sand and debris for thousands of years, hence its very good condition. One of the corridors catches my attention. The black granite lining has survived in very good condition. The precision with which the blocks were fitted together over 4,500 years ago is astonishing. Undressed front edges are the characteristic feature. For some alternative researchers, this is evidence of unknown today ancient techniques of softening or melting granite. Most likely, however, this was a way to protect delicate edges during construction. Only were they smoothed when the walls were finished. It's also another example of postponing construction works, perhaps due to Menkaure's death. As you can see, there's a causeway stretching far to the east. It leads to the now non-existent Menkaure Valley Temple. The satellite pyramids are classified as G3A, G3B and G3C. These are probably the burial places of the royal wives of Menkaure. The westernmost pyramid, G3C, is definitely in the worst condition. A participant in Napoleon's expedition to Egypt, engineer and scientist Jean-Marie Joseph Coutel, initiated the dismantling of the pyramid in the hope of discovering an intact tomb inside. Fortunately, he gave up after removing the upper part. Sadly, prompted by the rich interior of the Khufu pyramid, ancient researchers looked for hidden corridors and chambers in the cores of the pyramids, not knowing that the Great Pyramid is an exception in Giza, and all other pyramids have burial chambers below the level of the base. The G3C and G3B pyramids are built of large blocks in a stepped form, and according to some researchers, they are today only the three-level cores of the former classic pyramids. Each of the pyramids had its own small temple built of mud bricks. Their discoverer, George Reisner, wrote, "Every tomb, private or royal, contained an offering place on the valley side, that's toward the inhabited fields. In tombs on the east bank of the river, the offering place was on the west side of the tomb, while on the western bank, as at Giza, it was on the east side. In the little mud and rubble graves of poor men in the north of the plateau, the offering place was only a small niche in the eastern wall." I must admit that this is one of my favorite places in Giza. There are simply no tourists on the southern side of the Menkaure complex, just these three impressive structures and the desert. Menkaure reigned during the era of the Great Pyramids, the golden age of the 4th dynasty, and must have been the most powerful man of his time, so popular that Herodotus praised his rule 2,000 years later. Then the king of Egypt, according to the priests, was Mykerinus, son of Cheops. He wasn't happy with his father's deeds. He opened the temples and freed the trouble-worn people, letting them go to work in their fields and offer sacrifices. He was the most righteous judge of all the kings, for which he is especially praised by the Egyptians among all the kings who ever ruled over them. Also, aforementioned Diodorus Siculus wrote about Menkaure. He is said to have hated the cruelty of his predecessors and sought to live in peace, doing good deeds to his people and doing many other things that would have made the common people favor him. To the world, however, Menkaure is most famous for his magnificent tomb, which complements the landscape of the royal necropolis of Memphis, which during the 4th dynasty was Giza, with the Great Pyramids of his father and grandfather.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel, like my video and leave a comment below. Special thanks to all my patrons. Thank you very much, you are the best.
If you want to help me continue this, please join my Patreon community, link below the description, or support me by sending super thanks here. I'd like to give a shout out to my patrons. Thank you so much, without you it wouldn't be possible. And if you're new here, I recommend you to watch my videos from Egypt, Turkey, Greece, Italy and Malta. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel to be up to date with new episodes. And see you on another ancient site.